Hi, welcome to A Dose of Reality. This is episode 1, The Power of Speaking Up. My name is Abby Weiss, and I am the host. We'll be talking about real conversations about addiction, healing, and hope in our communities. So the purpose of this podcast is just to raise awareness about the opioid epidemic through lived experience. We're going to be trying to break the stigma by talking openly and honestly by people who have lived and experienced these things. In our future episodes, we'll be having interviews with first responders, educators, recovery specialists, and people with lived experience. Topics like prevention, harm reduction, family support, and finding treatment. On today's episode, we have Danielle Weiss. So this podcast kind of came to fruition through working with the Fight Fentanyl campaign and just working in the field and also experiencing the opioid crisis. So there's a lot of information out there, but a big goal of mine is to kind of channel it to all people who would benefit from hearing it. So the best way to do that is through using a lot of forms of media to kind of reach all these populations. So there's a lot of misinformation regarding substance use that just exists in general. So this podcast really gets to hone in on the individual aspects of the opioid crisis and how it affects all of these people. So we'll be using casual conversations just with people who have lived it, who work it, and want to make a difference. For me, the opioid connection is personal in a family aspect. So I've also worked in the field and I've seen the struggle and the suffering of other individuals, but I've also lost my father to an opioid overdose, which makes this really significant for me. As I've moved through this journey of loss and healing and learning, I've kind of made it one of my life missions to change the path of the opioid epidemic and help other people while also helping myself kind of break free from those struggles. So I have my mom here with me today, and we're just going to be talking about what this looks like in a family aspect and how we've kind of fought through experiencing opioid use in a family system.
Thank you for having me, Abby.
Yes, of course. We are very excited. We're just going to start by talking about what opioid use looks like in the family and kind of how that impacted our lives on a small scale, but also a large scale, and what other people can kind of learn from this.
Okay. We spend so much of our time in those moments. Sometimes you don't even realize you're just going moment to moment and trying to get through the day. Initially, it was just little one-offs. You don't necessarily know that your loved one is actually dealing with addiction right away. You just notice a change in their personality. Maybe they aren't showing up as much. Maybe they aren't present as much. And that's really what happened in our circumstances. The dynamic started to change.
So I think that a lot of people experience that where addiction doesn't just kind of start and all of a sudden it's like this full-blown problem, right? So we see it and it starts out small, right? You might start using a substance casually. You might use it from an opioid prescription, which I think is the case for a lot of individuals. And then it slowly snowballs and turns into a much larger problem than the individual or the family or the society as a whole. So what you're explaining, I think, is probably the situation for a lot of people.
Absolutely. And to speak to that is, our circumstances mimicked what you just explained. And it started in one particular area and evolved dramatically. There was a set of circumstances in the very beginning where it's important to say that a lot of people spend a majority of their active addiction trying to get into recovery or bouncing back from clean time to deep into the throes of it. And we spent a lot of time bouncing back and forth because ultimately he didn't want to be in active addiction, right? So one particular moment, which speaks to what you were saying, is very first time we walked in and there was a question about a particular type of substance. And it was a hard no. Right. I will never experience anything like that. I would never do anything like that. And the tricky part of addiction is it evolves and it takes that person from I would never do such a thing to, well, that I would never is the only way that I can get through my day. And that's truly what our experience was.
Yeah, I think this comes up a lot of times so I've worked in treatment, I have that experience, and it comes up a lot of time in there from individuals when you're working in sessions. And the common theme is you don't wake up one day and decide today's the day that I will become an addict, right? So as people are working through their recovery or trying to get to that point, even when they're in the depths of their substance use and they're saying, I will never do X, Y, and Z, At that moment, maybe not, but as you're moving through it and what you're using at one point suddenly doesn't fix the craving that you're having, all of those promises that you've made to yourself or your family don't necessarily hold up, right? So one of the things that I've learned and that I like to share with other people is that like 3 of the basic human necessities are food, shelter, water, right? And then when someone enters this like deep space of addiction, their brain then comes to add that 4th necessity, which is whatever substance they're using. So it bounces the whole family around and the individual, especially because the only thing the individual is seeking out really is their next fix of the substance. And it totally changes and rewires your brain, which is interesting because the individual doesn't always recognize it and the family doesn't say like, oh, well, you know, it's just how their brain is like working right now. And it makes it difficult for everybody to get there. And no one wants to be in that situation.
No, but you just made a really great point because so much, and your points are, you can come to your points to me like globally, and I can then turn them into like this moment in time that I can draw from directly, where in our experience, that 4th necessity, right? So you named the 3 basics and indicated then a 4th comes to life, right? And it was true. That is how he got through the day. That is how he remained functioning. He truly functioned in that time span at a better level with than without.
Yeah.
Right? And sometimes I only knew where we were in that span when he tried to not use, right? Because then we could do nothing, right? So, but that fourth necessity truly gets them through the day in that particular moment.
So how do you think that the impact of like silence, shame, or denial at the individual level or the family level kind of furthers this problem or doesn't further the problem? I know in my experience, I think that silence, shame, denial, guilt, kind of all of these things has made the problem worse for me until I started to fight back against those things. I know this is probably different on an individual level or a family level, which is why it's important to have these conversations and kind of see where everyone is at with some of these aspects.
There's so much guilt at so many different levels. We feel guilty because I spent a lot of time, when I look back now, so from where I am now to taking myself back there and kind of preparation to, you know, talk through some of these things, spent so much time like ensuring that nobody ever found out.
Right.
And the fact of the matter was, everybody already knew. I was the only person that I had convinced didn't know what was going on. You know, I spent so much time thinking I was keeping secrets when in fact I wasn't keeping secrets. I was just trying to protect everyone. I was trying to protect him. I was trying to protect you guys. I was trying to ensure that not a single soul in our periphery could figure out that there was any level of dysfunction, and to the extent that it was. And what did that do? It made it so that no one was getting better, right? Like we weren't going to get better because I wasn't going to acknowledge it. He wasn't going to get better because I was too busy fixing all of the problems, so there were never any consequences.
Yeah. I think another thing that is like often a common theme just in the workspace is that this isolation aspect fuels addiction. So without that connection, whether that be in the community or the family system or trying to seek out treatment, whatever that may look like for the person, oftentimes makes the addiction worse off. And then since this is like about the family dynamic, silence in that family system often makes it harder for them to heal too, because there's at any given point 48 million people in the United States struggling with addiction. And as we silence those individuals who are experiencing it and their families, we sort of begin to forget that there's so many people who experience it, truly so many people. So if we can kind of work through the silence and the shame of the situation and form connections in people who are either working to make a difference or people who are experiencing it, that the walls that come up around the situation will slowly start to dissipate a little bit, and we'll be able to find some sort of healing throughout that. So if you're giving a piece of advice to families or to individuals who are kind of dealing with these issues, what would you say are like the warning signs of severe substance use or substance use when it starts out, or like things to watch out for maybe?
That was a lot, all encompassed in one quick question. So what kind of advice now would I give my past self? Understand that if your loved one takes the step to recovery, you need to take your own steps.
Yeah.
Because that time when they're gone and they're truly, whether they go freely or they go because whatever reason, they're gone. They took that step and they're invested and they're gone for 28 whatever number of days. That program that they're in is pushing in healing to whatever level they're willing to accept. And we as the loved ones don't automatically receive that same level of therapy and intervention. And so your loved one comes back with a potentially different frame of mind, right? Like expecting everyone else to be healed and ready and excited when in fact we're all still a little pissed off.
Yeah.
Right? Like you just got a 28-day vacation. I'm still trying to keep my shit together. And like, what do we do now? Because that's not fair. That's not fair at all. And that's not fair to do to them. And we need to give everybody a fair shot, right? So do my short version of the answer, and I apologize, is do yourself a favor and treat yourself as well.
And I think that if someone is going to treatment, whether it be a quick 5 or 7 day detox or a 28-day stay at a treatment center, take advantage from the family side of the family healing opportunities that they may have. Of course, this depends on where someone is going to treatment, but seek out like a grief support group. You can seek out a family program within the treatment center itself. So that was a good point of also making sure that you're healing yourself from the family side while the individual or your loved one is also seeking out resources for themselves. And just to kind of tag on to that a little bit, I don't think that you have to wait until they go to treatment to receive your own services and supports, because you never know how long it might take someone to become ready to go to treatment or to take that first step or kind of go down whatever path to their version of recovery. It's not the same for everybody. You don't necessarily have to receive this like structured treatment to be in a space of recovery that's defined by you, but you also have to be willing to kind of work through your own day and be content with where you are in life. And if that means going and receiving the supports that you need prior to your loved one doing so, it's still important to kind of do that at the same time. So some of the signs of substance use disorder, they're not going to look the same for every person,
Right.
I don't think.
Right.
Whether, like, there's not a one-shoe-fits-all model of addiction.
Right.
And I think it's important to recognize that. But I know you mentioned, like, some behavior changes, not showing up to things, not meeting the expectations that you have for yourself or for your family. Those are all kind of pivotal moments when you might start to recognize that something is wrong.
You'll notice physical changes. You'll notice some things that maybe they cared about that they don't, depending on how intimately you're involved. You may notice fiscal changes. You may notice, changes in banking accounts, or you may notice things that you had that you don't have anymore. It really just depends on how intimately involved you are with this person, right? In what you might see. But you'll certainly see behavioral changes. You'll see, somebody who was very present may become so much less present. At least that was our experience, right?
Yep.
So can't speak to anyone else's experience. To your point, it's all different.
Yeah, and I think that as we go through this and kind of like connect back to the community, it's important to recognize just some of these general signs. And if you start to question, like, is something wrong? Is something changing? Look at the resources that exist, see how they match up to kind of what you're going through, and try to make that connection. It's really all about having these open and honest conversations, which you may not get with the individual, but having these conversations with others who may be experiencing similar things and kind of go from there.
I think it's important to ensure that, anyone who's going through it from the family side give themselves some grace also.
Yeah.
Because it was hard. Like, I didn't want to have hard conversations for so many reasons. Like, I didn't want to, if you talk about it, then you put it out there, then it's real, right? So if I don't talk about it, then it's not really real because nobody, we didn't acknowledge it. But at the same point in time, you mentioned these open, honest conversations. They are hard to have.
Right.
It is very hard to look at someone and be like, hey, let's talk about this. I didn't want to do that.
Especially when you're not
certainly didn't have
in that therapeutic environment to like be prepared to have those conversations.
It's scary, right?
Yeah.
And it's intimidating, but they're so important if you can have them. And, to your point, you got to do the work for yourself too.
Yep. So I want to kind of shift into talking about how families are able to support themselves. So this is like outside of the individual with the opioid problem or the substance use problem as a whole right now. So what advice would you give to a family unit exclusive of the individual with the substance use? How would you say that they should support one another or give each other grace and kind of work through these healing processes while they're experiencing this life-changing event?
I'm going to answer that based on personal experience only, because again, family dynamics are so different, right? And having a strong network of people you feel comfortable with. So whether it's a blood family or family by choice, having people that you can go and be like, this is where I am, and this is what's going on, and I just want to share. I don't even necessarily want you to say anything back.
Yeah.
I just need an ear. And if you don't have that, right, sometimes you just have to journal it. Like if you don't have a real person at first and you have to get it all out there and you have to acknowledge it, because sometimes there are family units that are a parent and a child, or, just a sibling who's left to figure, like who knows it. So you have to try to work with what you have in your most comfortable way, and then be brave. And then be brave enough to step into a meeting and say, hey, I maybe I just went non-judgmental and I'm just here to listen. And if you can't do that, I went to one. I'll be very honest. I went to one and I was like, I'm not equipped for this. Like everybody in here is ready to not be mad. I still want to be mad.
Yeah, I think you make a good point with that. I'm just going to cut you off real quick. I think you make a good point with that. And while you're going through these situations where a loved one is experiencing an opioid use disorder, substance use disorder, whatever it may be, there's so many feelings that you're going to feel. So you're going to be pissed off and you're going to be sad and you're going to feel anxious. Yeah. And then there might be like a split moment where you might be happy that they're like away at treatment and you get to regain some sense of normalcy, which I think is also really just important for everyone to hear. Like there's not one or two feelings that you're supposed to feel. You're going to feel all of them. And I think that might be one of the strangest things, especially when you're like finding a glimmer of hope in like potentially one of the worst situations that you endure. And just being able to like find the grace and accepting that like everyone's going to kind of be at a different point in their healing process in that family unit. And you have to be understanding or try to be understanding of, okay, like so-and-so is like really angry still. And I'm sort of like on the upswing of this and I'm okay with the situation and I'm like working on that process. Everyone's process of healing and accepting this is going to be different. And I think there's a lot of, you need to give grace to other people in your family as they're also going through it. And that's probably like one of the best ways I can say to support each other in this, like regardless of your family dynamic or the specific coping strategies that you may use. I know we said it before, but just kind of like giving grace and then also giving credit when credit is due. So you can be pissed off that they're away at treatment and that this happened in the first place, but at least recognize like they're taking that step. And then also, like, be understanding of the fact that other people in your family system or their friends, their loved ones, whatever, they're experiencing the same thing, whether it's on the same level or not. Like, you're all grieving this situation in some capacity.
I'm gonna jump in about a couple different things because you keep saying things that make all these different thoughts come through. But talking about all the different emotions, right? Like we used to talk about how it like felt like a roller coaster.
Yeah.
Like you're on this roller coaster and you can't get off, and all you want is the exit sign or a pause or like let me out of here. Like I didn't buy a ticket to this roller coaster.
Yeah.
Right. Like I just want to get off. And then to your point, everyone is feeling it differently. But if you find that you are just so mad. Like, also don't be what stops someone else from being able to recover.
Yep.
Right? Like, if you have to step away because you realize that somehow you're not ready to forgive or whatever you need to do, don't make that someone in recoveries. And this is just I've never been on that side of it, right? But you can't get in somebody else's way either just because you're still so mad.
Right.
like separate yourself however you have to so that you can both get where you need to be.
Yeah, and I think that there's like still a place for anger probably in both parties, but you can't let that dictate someone's road, essentially. One of the strategies, I guess, that we used to cope was really just like trying to keep that sense of normalcy. So we were always involved in sports and school activities and like academic things. And I think it's important to not let the opioid use or the substance use of a loved one kind of take over someone's whole entire life, someone being like the family unit. So trying to keep the sense of normalcy while still recognizing that, like, yes, this problem exists. Yes, it's inconvenient for everybody, including the individual who has a substance use disorder, but then not letting that kind of eat away at every single part of your life that you still enjoy. What are your thoughts to like kind of go along with that, I guess?
That was spent a lot of years in that space where it was like, we're going to keep it all together. And so when I talk about like, you're just second to second, right? Like the goal was to do your dead level best to not let anything else going on that was out of your control impact you guys. Like that was my personal kind of goal. So I think that it really depends on what everyone's life looks like next to and beside their loved one in the middle of addiction. But yes, like if you have small people, I used to call them backpacks. If you have backpacks, you need to try to keep your backpacks. You need to keep your backpacks in order, right? Like their lives need to be as normal, for lack of a better word, as they were before, right? Because we want to minimize impact to the best of the ability. They know their loved one is missing, right? Like they know they're
in and
away
out of
at school
or whatever it may look
or
like.
wherever they might be in that particular moment. But yes, to try to keep a level of normalcy. And that goes for the person in charge of everyone also. So whether that be a parent or a grandparent or whomever, right? Like you of yourself, trying to keep your own normalcy. It's very hard to not let, in preparing for this and kind of thinking, you spend a lot of time trying to fix your loved one.
Right.
Right? Like it's your responsibility to fix them. And you forget about, oh my gosh, I have to get to work. Oh my gosh, I have this responsibility. Oh my gosh. So trying to keep that level of ownership of your own life and recognizing that, like for me, it took a really, really long time to realize that I
had your own life.
No, I didn't have control to fix it.
Okay.
Like forget about that.
Yeah.
Like no matter what I was going to do, I was not going to fix this. So I could dump all of me thinking that somehow that was going to do it, when in fact it wasn't until the day when our loved one was like, I don't want to do this anymore. Like this is it. Like this is the last rodeo. We are doing this and this is it and that's it. Right? And you kind of like through all of those experiences, it's important to slowly but surely set your own boundaries and to learn how you can love your loved one.
Right.
Right? Like that became important because you will drown also. Right? Like if you allow someone else's stuff to become so yours, you are capable of sinking as quickly.
Yeah. I think you made a really good point there. I think a lot of people, whether it be spouses, children, family members, friends, whatever, a lot of the times we think that we can fix the problem. And then this theme comes up where it's like, well, if they loved me X amount, then like they wouldn't still be using. And that's a great thought and all, right? Like theoretically that should be how it works. The reality of it is that that's not how addiction works. It's not how substance use works. And there's not an amount of love that can fix that. And then from the substance user's perspective, it's not as quickly as like, okay, I love my family, so that's enough for me to stop. It's oftentimes not as easy as that. And I think people throw that around quite loosely where it's like, oh, I realized like just how much I needed my family and that was enough for me to stop using heroin. if that works for you, perfect. But a lot of the time that's not the case for people. And I think it's just important to recognize that this problem is bigger than any one person. It's bigger than the family unit. And it's not fair to any party to kind of like slap that perspective on it where it's like, well, they must not love me enough because they're back at treatment, right? I don't think that works for anybody. It's going to make the family members feel worse. And then it's also going to add this like extra level of trouble for the person using substances, because a lot of the times they do love their family and they want to go back to them and they want to have this like perfect family dynamic. And their main intention was never to end up in the situation that they're in, right?
So the amount of guilt that our loved one put on himself, I didn't need to. There was not another soul in the universe that could have added 1 ounce of guilt that they didn't already carry. And there were moments where truly and honestly, they felt that the best thing they could do was to not come back to us. Mm-hmm. That every time, and the guilt that they put on. And so people who have that, well, you know, you just, if they loved me enough, like there is no need to try to think that by making someone know that this addiction is bad, you shouldn't be doing this. Like,
obviously,
seriously,
I mean, I think they know that already.
Like, they know what I won't use the word they. Our loved one knew exactly what was happening, and that is not what he wanted, right? Like, that is, like you said, wasn't a day when he woke up and was like, this is the day that I am going to do this and destroy everything around me. Certainly that was never the goal. The goal then became, I got to get through the day. If this is what I got to do to get through the day, this is what I have to do. And then it became like, this is too much for the people I love.
Right.
And
I think that's kind of what we like to skip over while we're in our own like grieving process of this, is we fail to recognize how the person who has a substance use disorder feels about the situation. Yeah. It's not all about us in the situation. Is it shitty? Yeah, it is. But they are also experiencing a horrible situation, and I don't think it's fair for us, like you said, to skip over how they feel about the situation. And we have to be able to give them grace. Yeah, be angry. Like, you're entitled to those feelings, but you don't need to pile on the guilt and the anger to make them feel worse. Like, you don't have to hit rock bottom to heal, which I think is kind of another thing that we like to talk about in this podcast and just like in this mission as itself, is you don't have to wait until you're in the basement of rock bottom to reach out for someone's
Absolutely.
help.
Absolutely.
So as we were experiencing this, or for other people experiencing it more so, what's like the community response at this point to substance use and addiction as a whole?
There are a number of, just like in the small community, a number of great resources that when you're ready to take your steps, you can step to. And they can be one-on-one resources. They can be community that, you know, Celebrate Recovery is a great one. You walk into a meeting, you know, they're weekly. There's zero commitment, and you share or you don't share, right? And it's just finding a space. Like I said, I was not ready when I tried. It made the entire experience awful, and I said I wasn't doing it anymore. Years later, it feels very different. Yeah. Like today, if I wanted to walk into that room, I would feel very differently about that room. But that's only because I've had all of this time to go through that space, right? So just knowing, like, when you're ready to Google what's out there in your community, right? There are local resources. I mean, you can go all the way up to like calling your insurance if that's something you have and that's something you want to do. But you don't have to have insurance to do those things. You can, you know, find a local meeting. You can check in with, you know, some people are very active in their church affiliations and they're that way. But we have a strong community for recovery, and it's much more supportive now. Yeah. And I think for me personally, because I've been more willing to have open conversations about what it was like than I was then, that I became aware. If you're not talking about it, you have no idea what's out there.
I think you just made a really great point. When this like journey began, as you're so silent with yourself, you think that there's like no supports in the community and there's no one there to help you and there's no one to reach out to. As you become more honest with yourself and you just start to accept that, like, yes, I'm living in this situation, and not have to be okay with it, but be ready to change or, like, seek out what's out there. Stroudsburg has done a really great job, and Monroe County as a whole, in kind of, like, taking out the taboo-ness of the topic. There's a lot of resources for the individual, for the family, for loved ones, for friends. And the great part is that they're not all clinical. If you want to go the clinical route, cool. If you don't, there are so many programs with more so casual like this. Yeah. And you're just like building this network of people who understand you. And I think a lot of times, I'm just going to kind of switch back to the individual real quick. A lot of the times it's intimidating to walk into a meeting, whether that be NA, AA, whatever you're seeking out. I've had experience in going to them because I've celebrated other people's year-long milestones of recovery. And me not being necessarily in that group, but just like watching other people in that dynamic, it's not what you expect, right? So NA and AA might have this like idea, or people have an idea about these groups where it's like cliche and it's not what they want and they don't need to go to a meeting, but it's not like, it doesn't matter if you believe in God or not. Like, you don't have to go there. Your God can be whatever you want it to be. And you get to create a network of people who understand what you're going through. So once you're willing to seek out the resources that exist in the community, I can promise you that they're there for you at whatever level you're looking for, clinical, non-clinical, extremely casual, whatever it is. And you can just like drop in. You can grab a brochure. Like, it doesn't have to be a commitment to any one group or program.
And don't let your preconceived notions about, so you made a great point, like, don't think you know what it's going to be like until you've actually been brave enough to walk through a door.
What's like one thing that you wish people would understand just about, I guess, the opioid epidemic as a whole?
When they say it can happen to anyone, understand that that is real.
You stole my line. I was going to say that. You snatched it right from me. And I think you make a good point to that, because when we think of like someone who uses opioids or an individual with an opioid use disorder, like those aren't the people that really have this problem. So in your head, and you like create this image of what that looks like, and then you start to understand that the problem doesn't look like that. Like, the problem really can happen to everyone. It can happen to these high-level executives who received a prescription for Oxy, right? Like, and they don't even misuse it. They use the prescription as followed, and they end up in this situation. Sure. So I think that that's really the biggest thing, is that you're not excluded from the problem, and chances are you know someone who's experiencing it.
The other thing is to always, do your best to treat everybody with grace, because when they say that you know someone who's either in the throes of it or they know someone, that's also not a joke.
Yeah.
Right? So your interactions, just kind of keep them graceful.
Right.
Because you never know what somebody's struggling with.
Yeah, and kind of just to circle back, like, the chances of you knowing someone who is suffering from a substance use disorder is high. 1 in 4 people in the United States know someone with a substance use disorder, whether it be a loved one or a friend. Like, you aren't alone in knowing someone, and you're also not alone if you're actually going through it and you are the one with the substance use disorder. So I think it's just important to keep that in mind wherever you are on this journey to kind of accepting where you are in life and then making those changes to not be.
I do want to say, because you just made a really great point, like if you are going to go through this journey with someone intimately who is trying to get through recovery, understand that relapse is a thing. And while the idea of, relapse is part of it was very frustrating, like for me to have to be like, I'm like, are we seriously?
Yeah.
Like, I just am supposed to accept it. How do I know when it's real versus like, I just wanted to use, like, but also preparing yourself. Like, if you're going to do this, educate yourself. Like, take the time and really try. Understand Narcan. Like, get it. Find it. To your point, Monroe County has done a great job of making it available. Get it.
Yeah, you can actually get it through the Fight Fentanyl campaign. I know there's a link on the website. You can also get it at your local pharmacy, and you're not banking on having to use it. I never plan to have to use it, and I have 2 in the car, 1 in my purse. We have them in the bathrooms at home. Like, just have it around, because you never know when you might come into contact with that situation and be prepared to use it. It's super easy to use. And like you said, education exists and it's out there in so many different forms of it. Listen to a podcast. You can do it like a quick Google search. The information exists and there's so much good information out there. Just make sure that your sources are obviously coming from like an adequate place. So what would you say recovery looks like, not just necessarily for the individual, but for families? I can answer this one first if you want.
Go ahead.
All right. So I think the neat thing about recovery is, like, again, whereas addiction doesn't have like one set model for it, neither does recovery. So you don't have to recover the exact same way as someone else, and your recovery might not, like, the end result of your recovery might not look the same. So while we all want to like promote an abstinence-based healing process, which is no substances, and you start that way and you end that way, that might not always work for everybody. Kind of like wrapped up into that component of an abstinence-based model, we take away people's availability for medications used for opioid use disorder, which is MOUD. And we have to be accepting of those because they are the gold standard. So I know we're going to touch that a little bit more in some of our future podcasts, which is going to be really exciting. But recovery doesn't have like a step-by-step guide, right? You kind of figure it out as you go. And I think that goes for both the individual and the families. Like, you find what works for you and you move forward with that.
Yeah, I would say like a quick one answer is time.
Mm-hmm.
Recovery looks like time.
Yeah.
Looks like effort. It looks like willing to acknowledge where you've been, the impact it had, and how you're going to move through it. Right.
I think, like, if I were to have been asked or like kind of proposed the idea for a podcast nearly 7 years ago, I would have laughed at you and then probably cried. So like you said, recovery on the family aspect for me does look like time. And now I'm able to sit here and have this conversation and know what I'm talking about, and also hopefully be able to provide a little bit of insight for other people. So like where we are now, for me, well, actually not too long afterwards, we created a Narcan event. So this was to push Narcan out to individuals who maybe have a substance use disorder, an opioid use disorder, but also their families. So this was at the Wesleyan Church, and we crafted it kind of quickly, and we were able to push out 50 Narcan kits and instruct people on how to use it. So if you have it, that's great, but if you have it and know how to use it, that's obviously better. And I kind of ran with that through many years of college and like strange twists and turns in my education. And I just graduated with my bachelor's in public health, and my plan is to kind of run forward with that. So you're able to take the knowledge that you get through experiencing this and push that on other people, and kind of be able to lend a helping hand to people who are in the same shoes, which has been really rewarding for me and also for other people, because I think the most important thing is, like, when you endure something like this, you, whether you like it or not, have this lived experience and you're able to share that with others. And for me, the biggest thing is trying to make it so the least amount of people will experience it, right? So if we can take that and share our knowledge and our compassion and our education with people who have been in our shoes or are in our shoes currently, it makes this whole topic and the whole situation just a lot easier for everybody.
Yeah, being able to be a soft place to land for other people who unfortunately find themselves, we having been through what we've been through, have then found that there are more people that we know who are somehow living a very similar life to some extent. And, to be able to listen if that's what's needed, or like I said, being a soft place to land. But again, when you're ready to share your story, be okay with sharing it.
So just like the main message, I guess, that we've really gotten today is that you aren't alone. So you may feel that way, but that's not necessarily the case. And there's help and there's hope in this healing process and in this recovery journey. Just a quick shout out to some of the resources that we know exist. We have the 988, which is the mental health crisis hotline. You can call that and they will direct you to mental health services. You can also do a search for treatment centers in your area if you're willing and ready to do that, and that number will also pop up. We do have the Carbon Monroe Pike Drug and Alcohol Commission, who can also point you in the direction of treatment services. Northbound & Co., which is a local nonprofit organization who is they have groups that they set up. They do like reentry for the workforce, a whole lot of good, like true social service programs for people experiencing these situations. And then we have the Law Enforcement Treatment Initiative, which is Monroe County's LETI program, which uses a really neat perspective of law enforcement and also treatment in a collaborative effort to make it so people who have kind of low-level substance use, like criminal records, if that's what we want to call them, they're able to receive treatment rather than incarceration or punishments. So in our next episodes, we will be talking more about harm reduction, treatment, and the LETI program's role in this. So make sure you follow and subscribe to A Dose of Reality. Share this episode with someone who needs to hear it, and we would love to hear feedback, stories, or questions to be featured in our next episodes.